Yo, Jay, thanks, man, for being on with us today. It's actually a subject I'm really excited to chat to you about, and actually stoked that I get to chat to you about it. So, if anybody that doesn't know, Jay's AR strategist and is an expert when it comes to AR. We've known each other for a long time. I think we met at Flow Space like a million years ago, and it's quite surreal to be in the Flow Space podcasting studio interviewing you on a subject that I find, I think the world finds to be so interesting right now, and pretty scary for some. I think, like I was saying to you before the show, we were just at the meeting last week, and we were talking about LinkedIn, but everything just shifted to AR, and everything keeps coming back to AR. We kind of kept shifting it back to LinkedIn, but everyone shifted it back to AR. So, Jay, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it, man. But awesome to have you here.
Noel, it's a joy to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, look, my role is the AI strategist and ops at a company called Rain Ventures here in the UK. Obviously, you and I got to know each other quite some time back when I was living in Perth. So we've since bounced around the world, and I've worked in the US for a while, and we've landed here in the UK. I got outvoted by my wife and son. They chose the UK over Australia. Still scratching my head, but nonetheless, it's good to be here. And from a perspective of technology and me getting involved in the world of AI, it's actually been really interesting because I actually teamed up with some friends from a few decades back, actually, when I was living in Dubai, who had gone headfirst into the world of AI. And for the most part, I was exploring AI in the context of my separate company, the Human Connection Company. And whilst people think human connection and AI are opposed, I would argue it's actually the opposite. It's about where can we leverage AI so that we actually have more time to focus on human connection. And that's where I get excited about it. But the path that I've been on really is just building my skill set around AI, working with companies to help them figure out how to use AI internally. It's been a wild ride, to be honest. I mean, it sort of goes back to my career began when the internet was becoming a thing and companies were thinking they needed a website, but they weren't entirely sure why. I mean, it really all just kicked off for me just before the dot-com crash. And this mirrors it in several ways, but it's very, very different for a number of reasons. It's going much, much faster, and we're dealing with a much more technology mature audience now, whereas back then, a lot of people just weren't using technology, they weren't really engaged, but now everyone's got a smartphone. Everyone feels like they've got a pretty good baseline of an understanding of tech, and then we've got this new technology that feels very human in many ways, and every day it just feels like it's continuing to move forward. So I think there's a lot of overwhelm, there's a lot of confusion, and that's kind of my job really, is to help companies and individuals navigate exactly that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, But I think to your point that that people are scared of it, etc. But if you and I today can get to a point where we can explain, and I'm not pro AR or anti AR, but if you and I can get to a point today where we can explain how AI helps more connection, I think we've done our job. Because I think we're in a position where we don't have a choice but to get on the AR train, whether you like it or not. So I think what I want from today, my aim for today, is to help people use AR but on their terms. And I think that's important because I think a lot of people are feeling very overwhelmed, as you say. And there is a lot of noise out there. So, I mean, getting to that point, businesses feel, and owners of businesses feel like they should already be on the AR train, and a lot of them aren't. What do you think's stopping them from just starting?
Well, I think it's overwhelm. I think it's the classic case of where to start, and there is this feeling that you need to take on everything all at once, which of course creates that sense of overwhelm and pause. The approach really is just the flip side to that, which is just start small. Like choose a workflow, a process in your organization that's low risk. It's highly manual in terms of the way it works at the moment, but would benefit from being automated. Start with that one workflow. Start with that one process, and that could be anything from Meeting notes, for instance. I mean, there's wonderful AI note takers now. So not that long ago, people would have a secretary sitting with them in a meeting, taking notes and then sharing those minutes with everyone. I think now most companies are leveraging some form of AI note taker that's then distributing the notes. And then perhaps you could build a process or a workflow into that where it looks at the tasks that have been assigned to everyone and then just starts pushing those tasks out to people and saying, Noel, here's the 3 things that came up for you on this meeting. And then the AI can potentially work with you to help you get through those tasks, all the way down to even taking on some of those tasks for you. But I would say that naturally becomes the evolution of that workflow. The first one is, let's make sure we're taking notes. The second one is, let's figure out what we do with those notes. How do we turn those notes into tasks? And then the third one is, how do we potentially start automating some of those tasks? So the job could be for Noel, but now your role is simply just to oversee that task and make sure it got done properly as opposed to doing it.
Yeah, I want to come back to your first point there, and because I want people to walk away from this with things that they can actually action and use. And to your point initially is don't automate too soon. I think the feeling immediately is like, I need to get on GPT or Claude, or I need to get on one of them. And that's the next question, right? Is that the wrong question? Should I be looking at platforms or worrying about which GPT? Or is there another question I should be asking? Because that's the issue with a lot of us, is that automating too quickly. So there's massive overwhelm. Don't automate too quickly. Do one thing at a time and still make it keep heaps of manual input there until you get to a point where you have that workflow and you understand that workflow, and then introduce AI into it. Now, coming back to that point then, if I'm then going, well, which platform is the right one? Is it GPT? Is it Claude? Is that where I should be? Is that the question I should be asking?
No, it's not. No. Start with the goal, right? So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And that's always, regardless of the technology. I mean, there is a lot of attention around AI, but at the end of the day, AI is just another tool. It's another technology, and technology is there to help us become more efficient so that we can potentially scale what we do and free up our brains to focus on other things that are uniquely human, which is what we spoke about at the start, ideally. So don't look at the technology. Otherwise, you're trying to shoehorn processes and you're trying to create a solution perhaps to a problem that doesn't even need to be solved, because you're trying to wedge it into the software. So just look very clearly at where in our business could things potentially be resolved. Choose something that, if it does go wrong, the downside is not that big a deal. And like I said, taking meeting notes is an obvious one. It could be automating an invoicing process. What you don't want to do is just hand the AI your credit card and say, go off and start ordering things for me. Obviously, there's many different ways that can go wrong. However, there are plenty of companies who are at that point, but it's a maturity level. And look, there's some really simple analogies. I mean, if you're trying to get fit, you don't walk into the gym and immediately start lifting the heavy weights and doing the more complex exercises and taking on all of the different machines. But it's overwhelming, right? Anyone walking in for the first time into a gym, it's scary. And it looks like everyone knows what they're doing. There's all these machines that you don't know what they do. And anyone who is helping someone through that process would say, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with some basic exercises. We're going to build some strength. We're going to build some confidence. And then as you start getting that confidence, then you think, all right, well, what's that one over there? Can I use that? And ideally, you've got a PT with you who's going to help you through that process and help you figure those things out. It's similar. It's like you're walking into this room that's just full of all these incredible pieces of equipment that can accelerate your goals and take you to new levels of strength, so to speak. But you're never, ever going to be in a position where you can just jump in and start using them all from day one. And if you try, you're probably going to injure yourself, right? So I think as an analogy, that's a good one to think about. And then the other one is I treat AI as an extension of the team. So we're already at a point where leaders are starting to lead a mix of human resources on their team. And I don't really like the word resources for humans, but essentially a human.
Yeah, no, neither do I.
No, exactly. It's the wrong way to look at it. But ideally, if you're looking at your capacity and your skill set, and you're saying, well, now I've got a mix of humans and I've got a mix of AIs. I literally have AI agents who are part of my team. And it's a similar analogy. You don't hand the company credit card and very complex tasks that are high risk if they go wrong, to the intern. You start off slowly. And likewise, if you're bringing a PA on, you don't give the PA all of your email access and everything to your calendar. You start slowly, you build up a sense of trust, you figure out where they're strong, where they're not necessarily strong, and you build it out that way. And that's, again, it's the same with AI. You just start with something that makes sense to begin with, build some confidence, and then build out from there.
So I think coming back to all that, I think AI is very, very good at doing so many things that the overwhelm's there. But the risk is, I find, is you create a lot of busy work, because not getting real work done, but lots of busy work. And I think that's definitely the risk with AI, because it has so much capability, right? So now it's running all these systems for you, and in a lot of ways not doing it well. So then the AI is crap. AI doesn't know what it's doing. But really, I think the analogy that you come back to with the likes of an assistant is, I think a lot of people don't think of an AI as an assistant. You need to teach it. You need to give it context. It needs context, and it needs heaps and heaps of understanding. So you need to prompt it properly too, so that it has an understanding of what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it. And then it is iteration, right? Coming back to it over and over again.
100%.
That's a big part
100%.
of it.
Yeah.
But to your point that I didn't really think about is having a PT, having a personal trainer. As an ex-personal trainer, I understand the value of having a trainer. My clients were leaps and ahead of everyone else, just because they had me to bounce things off of immediately, and 15 years of making mistakes beforehand. So having that is something I hadn't really thought about, and I think a lot of people should consider that, is the likes of someone like you. Obviously, that's why we're talking. But talking about that, and you have touched on this a fair bit already, but what is a good sign that a company is doing it well, that they've got it under control and they are doing it well? How can and into the same boat, what's the sign that they're not doing it well? Because for me, it's not always obvious, because busy work is it's ticking boxes, right? And we're using AI, awesome, but that's not the box we're trying to tick, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you're in a position, let's start with what is the test for things not going particularly well. I mean, if you're essentially finding that the team are getting confused, and like I said earlier, potentially you're trying to shoehorn things into the software, and you're seeing resistance from the team, then you've got it wrong. Whatever path you're going down is the wrong way of doing it. The other thing is, you want to make sure you're not introducing AI into the team with this sense of like, good news, everyone, you're going to be redundant in 6 months because you're going to help me train up these wonderful AIs that are going to take on your job. So if there is a sense of that within a team, obviously you're going to meet resistance. It really needs to be positioned as, how do we scale the team that we currently have? And you will know it's working because essentially, with the team you have, let's say you've got a team of 20 people, you will now have more efficiency, and you will look at the bottom line. You'll say, right, well, we're spending less to do at least the same as what we did before, or potentially we're spending less to do more. And those are the metrics by which you can measure it. And then also, just from your team, if your team are feeling like they're suddenly becoming superheroes, and that really is the feeling. I mean, essentially, once you figure out how to use the tools, which, by the way, is incredibly easy, because the tools now, you can actually ask them how to use them. So I'll often say to whatever AI I'm using, I'll often say, is this the best way to get to the result that I'm trying to get to? And it will say, well, actually, you've given me a decent brief, but I would next time do this, 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 and this to help me understand what you're trying to get to. So, and again, just getting back to that analogy of people, we're now at the point, like in the early days of AI, you were kind of bringing on an intern for the most part. And when you bring someone into the company, or let's say someone who's fresh out of college, when you bring them into the company, you need to spend a lot of time with them. You need to teach them things that are so obvious to you, but aren't obvious to them. And that was the prompt engineering piece, where a really good prompt would help the AI understand, who am I? What am I doing? What's the purpose? You'd have to put all that into the prompt. Now, we're at the point now with the models that are coming out today, where you actually just tell it the result that you want to achieve. And if you give it too much instruction, so if you give it a really detailed prompt, that can actually hold you back because you're then restricting the model from doing what it does to figure out the best way of getting to the outcome. So we're now at the point where you're essentially hiring a PhD student with 50 years of experience, and you don't have to spend all of that time briefing them. You don't have to give them massive amounts of context because they're coming in with that understanding of context. You for the most part, you give them your business context. You make sure they understand what your company's about, what your values are. Very, very important. You give that context to it. And then you essentially just say, here's what I'm trying to achieve. What's the best way to get to these outputs, these outcomes? And that is where we are now. And look, the mind-blowing thing is we've got there in the space of a couple of years.
Yeah,
and the rate of improvement, it's exponential. So if you look and extrapolate 2, 3, 4 years from where we are now, it's exciting and it is scary. I mean, it is scary to try and understand. I mean, it's a new technology that really, it's a lot to take on in such a short space of time.
But to your point, and you've hit on it again, it is scary. But I think for a lot of business owners, something they may not be considering and might not have considered is, in some ways, you're going, please train your replacement. And they're not aware that is sometimes how it comes across, even if it's not their intention. So bearing in mind that it's scary for you, but it's maybe even more scary for your staff. So company culture is so important. And how you introduce AI into your company, you need to consider more than just the factors of how to do it effectively, how to do it without alienating your staff, and how to consider what they're feeling with this. So I come back to this whole piece where bringing it into your company, let's move away from which platform, etc., because each one of them has their own skill set that they're good at, but they all have the same inherent risk in terms of privacy, governance. They're all got that issue. And to give an example, I see it in the likes of a lawyer. A lawyer wants to bring AI into her company. The risk is twofold. One, AI makes shit up, okay, which we all know about. But the other part that's not so obvious is that privacy is a huge piece. That you're giving it information that you're giving it to another corporation, and they have the right to use it, which is really scary. How can companies and individuals protect themselves or use AI in a way to look after themselves? I think for me, it's fear and danger, right? Danger is when you don't know what the risks are. Fear is healthy. So understanding where the risks are. What are the risks, and have you got some ideas or some suggestions around how to use AI safely around privacy and accuracy?
Yeah. Well, look, every company needs a policy. The AI policy in terms of how AI is going to be used within the company. And that policy should flow through into the different departments, because different departments, depending on the sensitivity of the content that they're working with. So marketing is going to have less guardrails around it than HR and finance, for instance. But you need an overarching policy, and then you need your policies within each of those departments. And you also need to make sure that the basics of that policy are that your team are not going off onto their personal AIs and sharing company information and company data with it. And the trouble is, that's exactly what's happening right now, because companies haven't got ahead of it. They haven't helped their team. And I mentioned it before, like, what you want is for your team to feel like you've granted them superpowers. Like, that culturally is how it needs to feel within the team. And if you get that right, then everyone's excited. Everyone's grateful. Like, they're like, suddenly I can do the work of 20 people myself, and I don't have to go through the rigmarole of clunky processes to get from A to B. And when it does click, when you start using AI in this way, you do feel like you've suddenly just been granted these incredible powers. It's exciting, and everyone wants to be efficient. Everyone wants to feel like they're really good at their job. So if you're doing it properly, that is how it plays out. The flip side is if you haven't come up with an approach and a policy, and you don't have a methodology for how AI is becoming part of your team, it's happening anyway. So they're going off to their personal GPTs and they're taking company documents and they're saying, write me a contract for this. So literally the train has left the station in that sense. And there is a risk around that, because if they're using a free model, well, then the free model absolutely has a policy that says, yes, we can take your data and we can train on it. So whereas if you've got a model in-house that is paid, then it's going to be like their policies, the actual LLM companies are not allowed to train on your data unless you specifically flick a switch that allows them to do that. So obviously, by default, you want to make sure that that's turned off. So as long as you're using the paid plans and everyone's clear on what the policies are, all the way down to the sort of data that's being shared with the LLMs, then you will be fine. But it's like anything. If there's ambiguity, then there's risk. And if you have certainty around how you're approaching this, then the team who's working on it will understand what they can and can't do. And importantly, you've given them the tools. You've given them the tools with guardrails around it so that you're not leaving the space for them to have to just go off and figure these things out themselves. And in a lot of cases, just using free versions of LLMs. And in that case, you really are opening yourself up for all sorts of issues.
Yeah. So you've covered a lot of my questions there. So one question that you and I discussed earlier that I think is really important and a bit of a segue from companies in general, but I think everybody feels it, is there's a stigma to using AI. And a lot of companies and individuals do not want to be seen to use it. How do you think we can get past that? Because the AI train has left the station, and letting the stigma stop you from using, because it's unnerving, right? I know for me personally how I use it, that if I'm ever copy and pasting from an LLM to anything that I'm doing, I am double checking the top and the bottom to make sure it doesn't have that little script that says, and we've seen so many people do it. I mean, we've seen it in some newspapers. So the stigma it's the most embarrassing thing out there, but there's obviously bigger risks to it, which obviously again has that stigma. How do you think we get past that stigma right now? Because I don't think we have a choice, right? Whether we get on board or not.
Yeah. So I would say that stigma doesn't necessarily relate to AI. I think the stigma is around laziness and lack of authenticity. And I think, like in the past, let's say, for instance, again, you had a PA write something up for you and you didn't check it, you copied it, you pasted it, and then down the bottom, it's got some notes from your PA saying, hey, Jeremy, should I do this, 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 and this? And you've just put it out there, then that's embarrassing. And it shows that you've just been sloppy. So the risk is that with AI, there is so much potential to be lazy and therefore for that sloppiness to flow through into what you're doing. And that rightly should have a stigma attached to it, because anyone who's really not paying attention to the work that they're doing and they think that they can just take something from an AI and just post it out there without checking through it, that is sloppy, and you should be called out for that. So, and the other one is authenticity. So, and this kind of goes back to what I'm building around the Human Connection company, is AI is wonderful, and it plays this incredible role. Like I said, it gives us superpowers. It can be a wonderful thought partner to be able to bounce things around with. But where I take issue with it is with companies going to great lengths to make it feel entirely human. And that to me makes no sense, because I think it makes far more sense for the AI to be authentic about, hey, I'm an AI. I know a lot of things. I can help you with this. And a classic example is a call center. So if I call a call center, I do not expect to be on hold anymore. Like, I've sat there in the past. Qantas was a classic one. I remember being on hold for 2 hours with Qantas, and then you finally get through, and then something happens on the line, you get hung up on, and you have to go through the whole process again. I mean, like, talk about a bad brand experience, right? Whereas now we're in a world where an AI can step into the call center and it can say, listen, I'm an AI. I can help you resolve this problem. Do you want to wait for a human? At the moment, that's a 30-minute wait time. Or do you want to work with me and see if we can solve this? Now, as long as I know that I'm having a chat with an AI, then fantastic. I'm gonna try that as my first point of call. And they're getting so good. Like, they're getting to the point, depending on the the difficulty of what it is that's needed to be resolved, I mean, that like 9 times out of 10, the AI is probably going to be able to resolve it. And I hadn't had to sit there and hold and get cut off after 2 hours. And then, or I can say, actually, no, I want to deal with a human. I'm happy to sit around and wait for half an hour to be connected with a human and go through to that. But where I think it becomes a problem is if the AI is doing the ums and the ahs and trying to create this sense of being a human, and you're asking that question at the back of your mind, like, am I dealing with an AI here, or am I dealing with a human? And that creates just a sense of distrust. And I think we need to remove that. Like, any AI experience should be upfront that you're dealing with an AI, all the way down to automated emails. I mean, they're so good now. Again, I was on an email exchange the other day with an AI that didn't disclose that it was an AI, but I figured out pretty quickly it was an AI. I mean, a good example of that is the response comes back within 2 minutes, and they keep bouncing it around. That never happens in an email support scenario.
Yeah.
But in my mind, as long as it says, "Hey, listen, I'm an AI. I'm going to help you as best I can. If at any point you want to jump out of this and go into a human conversation, great. These are your options." And in some cases, companies might say, to deal with a human now, you got to pay for that because there is an overhead that we have to build into that. And some people may be happy to pay for those sorts of things. So I think it's the authenticity piece. And as I said earlier, it's really just going back to, we need to be proud of the work that we're doing. Now, if we're using an AI to help us do really good work faster, that's fantastic. That's where it plays a great role. But we still need to own the work that we're putting our name to. And if we're just cutting and pasting something and we're putting all the AI notes in there, that's just sloppiness, and that needs to be called out.
That's awesome. I mean, Jay, just to kind of come back to everything we looked at in terms of how we do this, it's a focus on using AI to bring and improve company culture by taking the tasks away that AI can do, so that the humans have more time to do what the humans need to do. And a big part of that's connection and bringing authenticity, to be able to have the time. Because I do think we are at risk, even without AI. The risk of authenticity and losing authenticity exists without AI. So if we can bring AI in a way that gives us time for that, I'm all for it. So there's that risk, there's that balancing act, right? And I think that's what business owners need to consider, is how that they can bring it in, on your point, how they can bring it into their company in a way that brings authenticity, nurtures the company culture, and gives their staff superpowers, not alienating them, and again, creating better work, not becoming lazy. So I did say this a long time ago when AI first came out, and it was always my thinking, is that AI is going to make smart people more productive and lazy people lazier. So those of us that are using it the right way, and I think I want to be on the right side of that. And it's a choice, right? And I think that's where this is going. I know we're coming to the end of this. I just wanted to touch base on something that somebody put to me a while back, and I think it's a great way of explaining it. And I'd love to get your feedback on it. I've heard AI compared to an atom bomb. And the idea being that when the atom bomb was first mentioned and people understood that there was this massive, powerful bomb that could decimate the planet, never mind a small town, and that these were going to be around the world and our enemies could have them, and what would they do? And it would be the end. If we ever went to war, what would end? It is still that. But we've got to a point with the atom bomb where, there's regulations in place. We're all pretty comfortable with it. We manage how it's managed. Do you think it's a little bit like that with AI at the moment? It's a lot of fear, but not as much danger if managed correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the classic thing with great power comes great responsibility, right? So the analogy of you're giving your team superpowers, and look, again, if you give your team clarity and you give them superpowers, then you're away. You've essentially resolved a lot of the issues that I see in terms of companies trying to figure out how to actually leverage this incredible tool that we have. as far as it potentially being something that can then go off the rails, yeah, well, anything, right? Like anything,
Yep.
technology or whatever it might be, can always be used in a negative way. So there's always a flip side. The more powerful it becomes in the way that it can help, potentially you can flip that around and use it in a way that's obviously going to have bad consequences. So I think like, you know, even these things, right? Like phones, like
Yeah,
incredible devices, so much power.
it's true.
And I think we're still figuring out what our relationship is with the phone. And we find ourselves now where some people are going back to these bland phones now, where you don't actually have a smartphone, you have a phone that's a phone. And, you know, it's got a few other things built in like maps, which is really useful for someone like me who gets lost coming out of the bathroom. But the point is the technology is moving so quickly that if we feel like we have to keep up with it, then we are going to implode, because, you know, especially in the world of AI, it's impossible. And we also just need, again, to go back to what it means to be human and the unique things. I always talk about AI can never replace human connection, because it takes humans
Yeah.
to be involved in that conversation. You can't throw an AI into the mix there and say be a human, because they're just not. And we will always sense if we're having an inauthentic conversation with something that isn't human. So that's, you know, that's kind of the beauty of what we're able to do around humans. But the point I'm making is that the technology is moving so fast. We're still trying to figure out what our relationship is with it. And I think if you just always boil it down to the basics, which is how can I use this technology in a way that it's going to free me up from the manual busy work tasks and allow
Yep.
me to spend more time with the people I work with, the people I care about, with myself, with nature. If I can use the technology in a way that it frees up more of my time to do those things, then wonderful. And we've been promised that for a long time when it comes to tech, right? Like, you know, going all the way back to the first computers. It's like, oh, look, good news. Like, you can now get 50 things done in the time that it used to take you to do one thing. And unfortunately, so far it's gone the other way. And now, you know, we've
Yeah.
got these things, and, you know, everyone's out there and you can work
Yeah.
24/7. The beauty of AI is I think it's the first time we actually have technology that genuinely can free us up to be doing all of those things that we do so well as humans. But we're figuring it out. And undoubtedly, when you're figuring things out, you make mistakes, you do things the wrong way. So as long as we keep bouncing back from that and we keep asking that question, is this allowing me more time to be more human and to spend time, like I said, with friends, family, nature, all of those things that matter, then you're probably going to end up getting it right. You're going to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've touched on my last question. So thank you. So I'll leave you with these last two questions. You've kind of touched on it anyway, but if business owners can do one thing in the next 30 days, or some things in the next 30 days, to make their move across to AR a bit smarter, a bit more tactical, and then how can they shift perception? How can they change their mindset around AR? So I'll leave those two with you. I think you've touched on them quite a bit anyway, but if you could finish up on that, that'd be awesome.
Well, in terms of how to do it, I mean, no one knows their business as well as the people in the business, right? So
Yep.
sit down, map out the processes, the workflows in your business, and you've probably already done
Manually
it,
first, right?
Yeah, just sit down and just manually write them down. Like if you work on a piece of paper, fantastic. Do you want a piece of paper? Like if you work in Excel or some sort of mind mapping tool, but just be very clear. What are all the different processes? You know, how do I raise an invoice? How do I engage a client? How do I manage a team meeting internally? Whatever the various processes are that you have, map them all out and then assess them across. I like the criteria of is it something that requires high levels of empathy, right? So if it's high on empathy, then it's going to be something that you want to have a human at least massively involved in the process, or you're probably just going to keep that as a human process, right? So if it's high on empathy, then it's something that's going to remain in the human realm. If it's low on risk, and if it's low on empathy, and if it's low on cost, then and it's high on impact, then those are the ones that are going to bubble right up to the top. And those are the ones that you say, let's just take one or two of them and start with that workflow, and let's get a win there. and then you build out from that. And again, going back to the gym analogy, that's like walking into the gym, seeing all of this equipment, all of these people using it. And you think, God, those guys are so far in front of me. And just starting with the very first one, which might just be picking up whatever. You know better than me because you come from a background of PT,
Start with
right?
the squat.
But maybe there you go. Start with the squat. Pick up a bar. Don't put weights in it.
If you can do nothing else right, do a squat right.
Do the squat. And that's it.
No,
right?
I agree.
Yeah. So just pick that very first one, the low hanging fruit, low risk. And again, like, using that analogy, I guess, with the squat, maybe there's not that much that can go wrong. If you're doing it with whatever, a body weight squat, whatever, however you want to take that analogy.
Exactly right. But that's exactly right? A body weight squat and ignoring all the other shit that comes with it. So a body weight squat and being good at that, because really getting into the analogy now, but the body weight squat is the most functional thing you can do in laugh. And if you can't squat, you can't do anything. So I think that's a fantastic analogy there. Focus on getting the basics out the way first. And I do like the idea that low on risk. I think that's a fantastic point. And cost, and it's going to have a big impact.
Yeah, impact, and then I do like assessing it across the empathy criteria as well. So is this something that requires high empathy? If it is, leave it with the humans, at least for now, and then at some point you might be able to have a human in the loop.
I think it's important
around that. But yeah, that's essentially where to get started.
That's awesome, Jay. That's awesome. Thanks so much. To your point though, on the dumb phones, my son and I are talking about dumb phones at the moment. Basically the smartphone versus the dumb phone. And you can spend a lot of money on a dumb phone, whereas I think 90% of us in our generation probably still have a Nokia 3310 that's going to outlive the cockroaches in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's like, just buy a Nokia 3310. You can just pull that one out. But I think...
And you're right. And I love that phone. Like, that was... At the time, that was more than enough. It really was. It was more than enough.
Yeah, and there's still millions around, I'm sure. Dude, that's awesome. Look, it's so good to have chatted to you about this, and I'm actually looking forward to doing this more. I'd love to do a little webinar, a little workshop, and kind of get into that, those points that you were talking about. I think that's such an awesome takeaway in terms of the empathy part of it, because I think that's huge. That's the biggest thing here at Flow Space is how we can create connection, especially on an individual level too. So I think that'd be great. If we can do some sort of webinar around, that'd be awesome. We'll see what sort of interest we get on that. But dude, again, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Noel.
It's not too late in the UK. It's early, right? In the UK?
Not that early now. It's 11:15. So it's still morning though. It's still morning.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, man, and I look forward to you on our networking evening end of the month.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Noel. Appreciate the chance to speak.
Awesome. Can I put you on the spot real quick? Can we get a checklist? I kind of put everyone that comes in the guest, I want a checklist that I can share, and then we can get out there. Can we do that? Some sort of checklist of how you're doing it right. I'll leave it to you. An AR checklist.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And
I will share that the criteria in a format that we use when we're going in there to help a company figure out what are these workflows, how do you then assess them, and how do you bubble them up to the top. So that's awesome. More than happy to share that.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Jay. And into the next one.
Speak soon. Thanks, Noel.